When I started 12 years ago being an environmental advocate, well, at that time, 2/3 of Americans thought climate change was a hoax. Well, that's not true anymore. Now I think Americans have gotten the message. It's just that our elected officials in Washington haven't. I'm Kent Minot, and I'm the political chair of the Harvey Broom Group of the Sierra Club in Knoxville, and I also chair the state transportation team of the Tennessee chapter of the Sierra Club. So I'm a Sierra Club anti-coal advocate. I live in Knoxville, in Old North Knoxville, and I love the neighborhood because of the old Victorian architecture, which appeals to me. And I love the house I live in because I get to be with my family and my grandchildren. The big picture is that it's lagging behind other areas. I hear people say that half the electric cars in the world are in China, and half the electric cars in the United States are in California. And so they're certainly not here, but I would say that Knoxville has made some serious progress in that direction. I think they're putting electric car chargers. They're starting to put them in low-income areas. I know they're thinking about the Burlington Library. And KUB, unlike almost any other local power company in the state, has an incentive for people to install chargers in their homes. They'll give you $400 when you put one in. I think Holston Electric does it too, but they're the only ones in the state. So I think we're making progress. I think the real big news on electric vehicles in Knoxville is the bus company. They've gotten 13 electric buses from a company down in Alabama. They'll put them into service in January, and they're on track to have the whole bus system completely electrified by 2030. So that's real leadership there, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. They do the electric charging infrastructure backwards. They follow the early adopters. Early adopters tend to be prosperous people. So they put the electric car chargers in high-income neighborhoods where people have electric cars, but most of those high-income folks already have a way to charge them up at home, so really there's little point to putting those chargers in unless they're accessible to the freeway or something. They need to put the chargers where people don't have electric cars, because chargers, of course, have to precede electric car adoption, especially if people live in apartment houses or in other low-income housing where it's difficult to install the charger. I think they're starting to change direction. Here in Knoxville, the Office of Sustainability is selecting sites in East Knoxville to put car chargers. And they're not looking at who owns the cars, they're looking at incentivizing future owners. But in terms of federal legislation, I think some of the things they've done are great, because federally they're doing the electric superhighway, which means they're putting DC fast chargers every 50 miles along the freeway system in the country. They started to do that here in Tennessee. It'll take them a few years to finish. But if you go up into the eastern part of the state, you'll see some chargers on the freeway. And so they've started to do that. I think that the policies you want that have affected adoption in other areas are basically give people money to go electric. And they've done that in California, so California leads the nation in the adoption of electric cars. But here in Tennessee, we don't have anything like that. There are no electric car incentives at all. Consequently, we lag behind. Now, federally, there's a tax incentive, but that tax incentive is only good for people who pay a fairly large tax bill. And so they need to actually start giving checks to lower income people so that they can get electric cars and also used electric cars. I've become personally acquainted with a lot of people that live in the neighborhood here, and these are people who are affected by coal ash in their communities. And when I lived in Los Angeles, I was working to get LA off coal, but they didn't really burn the coal in LA, so I wasn't talking to people who were personally affected by living next to a coal-fired plant like this one over here. But here I am. People are affected in their health. They're affected economically by the burden of having this plant in their community. And so it's personal for them. And so I'm happy trying to help the Sierra Club bring resources at their disposal so that they can have a little more influence in getting their voices out. We mobilize members to come to Anderson County Commission meetings. I think this location right here, this is the first place I came to. But after I got to know some of the people, I realized that I was also talking to people who'd gotten sick from cleaning up the Kingston coal ash spill, which is 30 miles west of here. So a lot of those people live in the community right here. And I was also talking to people who feel that the plant right here is making them sick. The plant is dropping stuff on their cars every now and then. It's polluting the groundwater in the community. It's affecting the fish that they might fish out of the river, and it's affecting them personally. Some of them had to close down the wells they got their drinking water from and get water from the city because the groundwater was getting polluted by the coal ash ponds here. Well, not much anymore. They're not mining coal really in Tennessee. They've done this, what is it called, the primacy bill, where they've given themselves the ability to regulate coal mining in the state at a time when there isn't any coal mining. And even if they were to resume coal mining, who's going to buy the stuff? We've got 3 plants now that look like they'll be closed down maybe within 3 years. And if we're successful in our advocacy, then we'll get TVA to go coal-free by 2030. And they're making noises like they might do that. They're pretty uncommittal about it. Even though we see this coal plant here, coal is basically dead. This thing will be shut down in 2 years, and now TVA is talking about shutting down a bunch more. What we need to do now is make sure that the plants are removed in an intelligent way that acknowledges the health needs of communities nearby and also their economic needs. So there's a whole lot of health consequences to leaving that coal ash sitting in groundwater, which is what they seem to be intending to do. So our activism involves putting the screws on TVA and getting them to clean up that coal ash right. And that means doing a lot of research about how to do that, and also informing people about what they're doing in other states, like North Carolina and Virginia, where they seem to be, well, at least doing it more right than what TVA is thinking of doing here. TVA was forced to get the coal ash removed at the Allen plant in Memphis because it threatened Memphis drinking water under the sand aquifer. Well, we have to try and figure out how to persuade them to clean up this stuff right as well, so that we can have basically a sustainable future for the people who live around here. TVA has not really quite directly evaluated all the testing information, like there's effluent exceedances in the ponds here, and they try and make a case that the coal ash ponds aren't really having any environmental impact on the community, and that's just not true. One really important thing that needs to happen on the federal level is that coal ash needs to be defined as hazardous waste. Now, back in the days of Lisa Jackson, when she was EPA administrator under Barack Obama, they had a whole bunch of hearings all over the country about coal ash. And they got rules about how to dispose of coal ash, but the one thing they couldn't do was get coal ash defined as hazardous waste. Even though coal ash contains materials that are defined as hazardous waste, the ash itself is basically as unregulated as household waste. And federally, that could change. And when that does change, that'll make a big difference to communities like the community here around Bull Run and the communities around Kingston and Cumberland plants as well. The issues around coal mining here in East Tennessee are that we have a lot of old coal mines that are still releasing pollution into the environment, and that pollution is affecting people who live near those mines. So we need to pass a mine reclamation regulation that forces the owners of those mines to put the necessary money in to restore the ground around there to its original condition, so that basically you can restore the lives of mountain people who lived in the area. It's never really going to be restored, but they could go a long way further than they've gone so far. The short answer is diversity in the economy, and by diversity I mean various different opportunities for people to get jobs and start businesses and make things happen that will, increase the tax base, increase the funding for their schools. Right now, school funding is, number 42 in the country in Tennessee, and that's because in a lot of the rural areas that fund those schools, they don't have any economies to create a real tax base to do that. And so the coal industry where it's been dominant in rural areas in Tennessee and in other states as well, basically creates a one industry economy. And that economy can flourish for a while they're mining the coal, but now that's really basically collapsing. I think all the three major coal companies have gone into receivership. And there are just scores of other smaller coal companies that have completely gone out of business. So they're not really going to bring that back. You can't save those communities economically with coal anymore, so you have to do it with other things. Now, one thing that they're talking about with TVA and some of the things that both SOCM and the Sierra Club have helped work on are rural broadband. Rural broadband's a great idea because that allows people to start businesses online. And they can import and export things from their areas. They can start small, responsible manufacturing. All of that stuff is the way to help communities in Tennessee. Don't try to bring back coal. It's a dead end. But there are lots of other ways that people can do it. Our groups have shown the way, but we need help from other economic engines. Both federal funding and private investment will help make that happen. Appalachia is diverse. There are native and indigenous communities in Appalachia. There are black communities in Appalachia. It's also diverse geographically. So, you know, there's those old songs about some dark holler and stuff. So people live in little pockets. And I think traditionally, people have stayed close to home in Appalachia. And I think that helping people get connected with each other is going to be important. There's a great group up in Johnson City called the Women of Mountain City, and they work to help women improve their condition educationally and economically and start businesses and stuff. And I think they're trying to get a rural broadband initiative up there too. But that's the right idea. I think they have a model for what might work in Appalachia. They're kind of politically neutral. They're not left or right. They've got a good model that might show other communities how to build the same thing. Knoxville is a great town. I'm really glad I moved here, and I have a lot of fun. I love the people I've met, but at the same time, Knoxville has some pretty serious problems. It's got what they estimate is 42% poverty among the African American community, and there's also extreme wealth inequality in the city. And while the city boasts clean air and stuff, that really ignores the pockets of air pollution. What I hope for my community is that we can intelligently embrace the opportunities afforded by the clean energy developments. We have a very sophisticated intellectual community here. We've got UT, we've got Oak Ridge, we've got other centers of learning. And so potentially we have the ability to develop a highly educated population who will themselves think up great things for us to do as we move into the future. I like what the city is doing about moving city operations in a clean air and clean energy direction, but I think the rest of the city needs to catch on, and I think, frankly, most of my fellow citizens don't even know about the electric bus system and all those other things. Go electric! Organize across racial and ethnic lines. Meet regularly with people who don't look like you.